Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katie Rowley. I'm with the NOAA Central Library, and I will be your technical host today. A few logistics to start. As an attendee, you are muted. So if you have a question or a comment, please put that in the question panel. If you have a technical issue, such as you can't hear the speakers or you can't see the screen, try logging off and back on. That would look like just Xing out of your the GoToWebinar platform and clicking that join link you were given again, and it will bring you right back in. Also, we are recording this presentation, so if you need to step away or if you would like to share this with a colleague, review it in the future, we will have this recorded and put up on the library's YouTube channel for you to watch again. Okay, and with those logistics out of the way, I am very happy to introduce our speakers today and turn it over to Dr. Alisa Young.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the seminar on the tool for diverse interview panels, orders. This seminar is going to be presented on behalf of the lead presenter, Eli Salahuddin. He is the NESDIS EEO and DEIA program manager. With Eli's time at NOAA, he has also been the lead here for NESDIS in this role for 8 years, bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience while advancing EEO and DEIA priorities for NESDIS. We also have Dr. Terence Lynch as a contributor to orders. Dr. Lynch's professional career began in 2001 with the USDA's Agricultural Research Services National Program staff in Beltsville, Maryland. Since joining NOAA in 2007, Dr. Lynch has worked across NOAA with NOS, NESDIS, OAR, and at the DOC level, having benefited from several leadership assignments. He is a graduate of both Alcorn State University and Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. And myself, Dr. Alisa Young, and thank you for that introduction, Katie. I have worked at NOAA since 2005, beginning as a graduate student in NOAA's Educational Partnership Program, specializing in satellite remote sensing applications and research. I have worked across NESDIS, in OSPO, NCEI, and STAR. In each of these roles, I have been a strong advocate for promoting and expanding NOAA's focus on DEIA, and I'm a graduate of Georgia Tech and the University of Alabama at Huntsville, and I did my undergrad in physics at Talladega College. So thank you again for joining us. We have really enjoyed working on orders, and with that, I will give it over to Eli to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young, and Dr. Lynch as well. I really want to thank the NOAA Library for giving us an opportunity in this platform to share these moments with you all in conversation and discussion about the orders palette. And I would like to start out by just kind of setting the tone, if you will, by giving you all kind of a brief background. And as you can see by the slide points, it'll kind of cover the development, if you will, or the timeline of orders. But we'll have to start out somewhat in the middle with respects to our most recent diversity listening sessions that we've been doing in NESDIS, where we created a platform for employees to safely be able to share their concerns and thoughts and ideas about the processes and practices that we were doing throughout our organization. And in that, in reviewing some of the suggestions and concerns that came from the employees, there were a great number of concerns dealing with hiring bias. Real or perceptual hiring bias in the hiring process, not only in NESDIS, but throughout NOAA. So as Dr. Votes, who is the administrative assistant for NESDIS, as we continuously saw those type of issues, we started having a conversation about what can we do to address this. And as Dr. Votes and I went through that conversation, and he relied upon me to give him some ideas, I remembered that the DPOG, which Dr. Young and Dr. Lynch was very key in that a couple of years ago. I was facilitating them as they were going and speaking to as many entities as they could within the NOAA process, trying to support the NOAA strategic plan by reducing hiring bias in our hiring process. And they had come up with this development of orders, or come up with this tool of orders, but it was running into a couple of very important glitches. One, first and foremost, was it needed Office of General Counsel's approval from a language perspective to make sure that all the legalities were covered. And then second, and perhaps maybe one of the more challenging points, is for organizations, when they come up with large-scale pilots like this, for long-term systemic implementation, who would take over this pilot? So the discussion between the Office of Human Capital Service and the Office of Inclusion and Civil Rights was ongoing. So long story short, OGC kind of paused us on some of the language. The pilot itself settled on the shelf for a couple of years. So back to me and Dr. Vogt, and Dr. Vogt saying, Eli, what are we going to do about this? You need to present something to me. So quickly, I said, I'm not a big proponent on inventing any wheels. There's already been a lot of very smart people, and more importantly, passionate people who are very, very concerned about the hiring potential or hiring bias in our hiring process. So I say, Dr. Vogt, I'm going to invite Dr. Young and Dr. Lynch in to give you a presentation on this previous pilot that we were working on, or at least this previous presentation that we were working on. We did it. Dr. Vogt liked it. And what I like to call courageous leadership, or through courageous leadership, he said, well, I understand the concerns that we may have at the NOAA level, but I would like to see us implement this in a pilot form. So we went back to Civil Rights and Office of Human Capital. We went through OGC, we tweaked the language, we got approvals from all to initiate the pilot, and now here we are. A year later, we are actually finalizing the pilot. So what is Orders? Orders is a collaborative tool that creates and supports the flowing and implementation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals within our organization. As I mentioned before, these type of activities were already embedded into the NOAA DEI strategic plan under Objective 1, which is your workforce recruitment and enhancing your workforce recruitment in a fair and equitable process. And also, it was also tied into other strategic plans and strategic goals through the NEP, the NOAA Executive Panel, and the strengthening of employee engagement to develop a more inclusive culture is systemic from an objective in all of the organizational or the different sub-organizational plans. So Orders really was a step forward in moving the needle with addressing hiring bias within our hiring process. So the goal was to translate this, of course, into our strategic plans to support Objectives 1 and 2, and the periods that were covered or that was given in the pilot was from August of last year to August of this year. The supporting documents that was built in the infrastructure was the pilot product, the project charter, the terms of references, hiring managers' feedback forms, and participants' sign-up forms, not only just in NESDIS, but NOAA-wide. Dr. Lynch, Dr. Young, any comments on that slide?
Not much, but just kind of a historical perspective. I would, just like to mention the fact that this effort has been going on since 2017. And I have to give shouts out to my former line office, NOS. Back in 2017, they were among the first, if not the first line office to put out policy in regarding to creating diverse panel for all hiring actions. So from that was kind of like the first thing. It was like, well, how do we go about populating these panels? And that's where the brainchild with Alisa and myself, as being members of the NOAA Diversity Professional Advancement Working Group, came up with this idea. I've served on many panels, as is with a number of other persons. But what we wanted to do is broaden the horizon, especially the diversity, by offering up a solution, kind of what we call a catalog that would make these hiring managers aware that there are other persons that also exist out there so they could have that opportunity. So that's what orders is all about. It's about providing a catalog where people can see that there are different persons, different backgrounds, or whatever, that are willing to serve.
Thanks, Terrence. I don't have much to add. I think you both are spot on in terms of our goal for using orders and developing it. So we just wanted to reduce bias and help broaden participation and enhance inclusion on the interview panels. Thank you.
Thank you all. So let's walk you all through the process for participants and just kind of give you a user perspective, if you will. So what you're looking at now is the Smartsheet database that was part of the infrastructure that was built to support the orders palette. And obviously it includes the volunteers for the palette itself, panel participation, and the type of data points and type of information that we are looking for and to walk them through, and as well as update opportunities or update lists, if you will, within the system. As you all can see as we go through the slides, that what we've tried to do in the orders palette was obviously build the infrastructure, if you will, but also try to go through the growing pains of what would it take from a palette perspective, what would it take to have an infrastructure, a large scale infrastructure like this at the highest level in NOAA. And what we found out was, as far as going through that process, is working very closely with the users and adjusting the palette to the user's needs and to the user's expectations were very highly effective for us to be able to collaborate with them and gain more traction, if you will, with the palette. So the process for hiring managers using the orders tool, as outlined here, it gives them an opportunity to search for people with expertise to date may be looking for, with obviously having a thought of using more diverse. And obviously when we talk about the word diversity or use the word diversity, we want to say that the palette used the word diversity in its fullest definition, or fullest spectrum of the definition, if you will, with respects to diversity of the obvious, of gender, race, things of that nature, but all the way until diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of values and beliefs. So all of those different type of diversity that human beings add to a conversation, which allows other individuals in that conversation the opportunity to hear and consider other perspectives, was something that we were trying to get the hiring managers and selecting officials to add a flavor of that to their selection process. So again, through the tool, they had an opportunity to search. They could also look for the opportunity to, again, add diversity from a perspective within our industry, if you will, with government agencies that do similar missions as us, such as NASA or NIST. So using outside outreach, if you will, to also add diversity to was also one of the objectives. Looking at the panel participation, utilization of the orders tool, what we were looking for was to give them an opportunity to gain experience in the interviewing, obviously give them an opportunity, as we stated before, to be part of the intricate workings of a hiring process versus always having information secondhand, if you will, and also given an opportunity, a seat at the table, if you will, to be able to make an impact on the influence that a hiring manager uses when they're making those final decisions. Now, as we all know, unconscious bias in the hiring process is something that every organization in the world faces, because human beings are human beings. We all have hiring biases. But what we seek to do was to ensure that individuals, even volunteering for the panel, as well as currently on our hiring panels, and as well as our selecting officials, know what their, or at least attempt to know what their unconscious biases are as they pertain to the hiring process prior to going into a panel. So we offered the training, we offered the resources, we ensured that they understood the expectations of this. Obviously, you can do hiring bias training for your interaction in every facet of your life, but more importantly, we wanted to focus on the unconscious bias that typically comes to light within the hiring process. And the more individuals were aware to know what those biases are prior to going into the process, the better they were able to manage those. So in the post-interview phase of the pilot, what we tried to do is use questionnaires and surveys. Again, the focus here was to capture the effectiveness of using orders, and more importantly, to provide feedback or get feedback from the users on how can we improve it. How can we make it user-friendly? How can we educate the users more? How can we ensure that the overall objective of minimizing hiring bias within the hiring process is being reached? So again, this is giving you all an opportunity to take a look at the orders dashboard, the navigation dashboard. I'm not really doing you justice by giving you this screenshot, because I can tell you the supporters, Sarah, whose names are on the front page, Sarah and Gail, they did a lot of work in helping us build this infrastructure, and they did a wonderful job in setting this up, and again, working with the users to ensure that we continuously make this dashboard user-friendly and obviously fully supportive of what the pilot, the orders pilot was trying to achieve. And as you can see in the references, we link as much reference information as possible based on the user's needs, the charter, if you will, the terms of reference, the training links, the orders palette matrix, which is obviously something that the participants had an opportunity to glean information from, and the participants, whether they were participating as hiring managers and selecting officials or merely as volunteers. So some very great references were added to the palette itself. And again, we are so thankful to our participants, because we know that interaction, we know that what we have done through this palette with respects to communicating with our hiring managers and our selecting officials is based upon their challenges, their needs, and their objectives. So we're very, very happy with the outcomes. I'll pause right here to give Dr. Young and Dr. Lynch an opportunity to chime in on anything that I may have missed thus far.
Thanks, Eli. I think you did a great job covering the participant process as well as the manager process. I do want to just mention that within the slide deck, there are links, for folks who are more visual, so that they can also see the forms and have a general idea of what type of questions are asked when you decide you want to participate and get within the tool. So if you do have questions on that, we'll be happy to go back to it at the end of the presentation. But otherwise, Eli, I know you're doing a great job. Thanks.
And Eli, I'd just like to mention to everyone that even though this is a NESDIS pilot, there have been other line officers who have expressed interest in use of the tool. So any hiring manager has access to the tool. All they have to do is request access through one of the members of the orders pilot team. So in terms of, just being of help, those persons that are on the call today, we'll probably reiterate this at the end, but, ask the question of your hiring managers, your supervisors. Are you aware of the orders tool? And if you're not, hey, let me provide you with this link, and that way they could solicit access.
Yes, thank you so much. So moving along, we're taking a look at the orders matrix now. So we're giving you an idea of kind of the delve into the dashboard and see how, in fact, we're kind of putting this whole piece of the orders palette together with respects to the matrix and the data points that we were looking to capture. And then, of course, this sheet also talks about how it was captured and how the numbers were calculated. So as you can see here, you have some participation numbers involved, but what's more important is the type of intricate detail that's gone into really qualifying and quantifying the orders palette as a whole, and always measuring it against the growth of the organization from the perspective of greater awareness about hiring bias in the hiring process, but more importantly, what organizations can do, steps that they can take to mitigate that. So as we look at the metrics, some of the points that we were saying, that we were covering, was obviously participation, the overall participation, the information from the hiring managers, the activity log of the hiring managers, the actions within or hiring actions eligible within the orders palette, as well as their questionnaires that were answered and received. And also the terminology breaks down on how we captured and calculated the data and what were the data points, and as well as some information at the bottom about the process itself. Again, I'm sure as you all know, when it comes to pallets, a lot of times the studies show that the level of activity, the level of passion, the level of emotion that generally goes into pallets are usually the greatest an organization would ever see for a particular program, because people are so vested in it. And I'm glad to say from not only from the orders pallet team also, but from the users on the orders pallet, that we really appreciate that activity, because we really hoped it, and we really believe that this is going to move the needle forward in NOAA with respects to reducing hiring bias in the future. So now we're taking a look at the order success matrix. And obviously this was broken down into our target areas, our pallet matrix targets, given our data points that we were trying to capture with respects to our goals, and then our status as well. And we measure the overall success of orders much greater than just the particular data points themselves. Because obviously this being a pallet, then there's a lot of other variables going to play with respects to the dissemination, the utilization, the time aspect, things of that nature, the education and awareness part of it. But more importantly, once we started getting that feedback, and I'll let Dr. Young and Dr. Lynch speak to that, because they actually were participants in the orders palette, as well as being contributors, participants on panels. So once we started getting that feedback from them with respects to the impact that they were having in their opportunities on different panels, and how they know that they were able to broaden the dialogue and the discussion of that panel to potentially reduce hiring bias, but just to give the panel those different voices from a diverse perspective that were allowing panels to think out of the norm, think outside of the box, and consider things that previously may have been glazed over with respects to considering applicants for employment. I do want to pause again now to let Dr. Young and Dr. Lynch chime in on that with respects to their participation.
Thanks,
So in
DY.
turn,
Go ahead, Tia.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so our orders team meets regularly. We look at the metrics. We have discussions about what we're seeing in these numbers, improving our accuracy in the reporting. And it's largely based on, feedback that we get via email. Sometimes someone will say, hey, just wanted to let you know that I signed up for orders and I just got requested to be on a panel. Or they may say, during a conversation, as we're having a panel, a member may say, I was selected out of orders. So orders is coming up in the conversation in terms of supporting these activities to minimize hiring bias. However, as you guys can see on that first line for status, it says that we are at 12% of orders usage, which is low, and we know that this number is not correct. So part of our personal experience is really driving some of our next steps to solicit the hiring managers to get responses from those hiring manager questionnaires. And then also we have developed a participant survey. And the participant survey is also another measure that we're taking to gather feedback in terms of, the use of orders, the input from the panelists in terms of, developing best practices and, ways that we can improve our process. So please be on the lookout for that. But, it is very critical that we do get the feedback, that we do have the questionnaires completed, because as we wrap up the pilot and present these metrics to the NESDIS executive panel, we do want to have the best numbers to build a great case to have orders be implemented NOAA-wide. So I'll just pause there. I know I can be long-winded. Terence, please go ahead and chime in based on your experience as well.
All right, so one of the things I want to mention, when you look at here, it talks about the participation, how 60% of the participants are in ERGs. This was actually a strategy for us to help diversify the makeup of the panel. Eli had mentioned early on one of the challenges that Alisa and I initially faced was with OGC, and that was due to some of the questions we were asking in terms of the demographics. So one way around that to try to help push things through is that we utilize the ERGs because we know that these groups are diverse. So that's one thing that was working in our favor. So that's why you see that high percentage of persons that are representing ERG. So I really want to give kudos to our ERGs for participating in this, because they've been very essential also with the marketing of the tool. And also, I think we're going to make mention of this is Latinos at NOAA. They have been instrumental in terms of helping to prepare people to serve on panels. Because I would be honest, when you look at the tool itself, there are some persons who've never served on a panel. So we want those persons to be successful and also be properly trained. So that's why we promote the usage of unconscious bias, among other things. Another thing that we also mentioned is those persons that have served on panels regarding their experience. So I'm looking forward to that survey, because just speaking on my experience of serving on panels, I will say that the selecting official or hiring manager has been very, very, very happy with the input in which they've received. Just asking basic questions in terms of, what is the makeup of your current staff? And how can we move the needle in helping that staff to be more diverse? So for instance, we have a lot of groups within NOAA, such as Sea Grant, Canals Fellows. But when you look at those programs, they're not really diverse. So if we have an opportunity to bring in for a person from an underrepresented group or background, that kind of opens things up. They may not have the proper training or whatever, but there are other ways in terms of helping that person, if selected, to bring them up to speed. And that could be simple things in terms of just providing that person with a mentor. So again, it's all about what is your current makeup of your staff. And if we're truly committed in terms of moving the needle and being more diverse, we have to change our thought process. So I think that's where the value of having a person from a different background, also coming from an underrepresented population, brings value to the process.
Excellent input. Thank you so much. So in summary, we're going to kind of cover what we've already covered. So we're going to tell you what we just told you. But what's more importantly is we're going to hopefully open up the floor, if you will, to some discussion on these topics. And what do you all think, not only about the pilot, the purpose of the pilot, the intent of the pilot, but more importantly, implementation of the pilot long-term systemically in NOAA. All right, so we've covered what the orders pilot is, okay? It really is a much greater tool than just we're saying right here, tools to improve the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility on the interview panels at NOAA. But I would like to tell you, overcoming bias within the hiring process and broadening the diversity of the panel participation is much more beneficial to the organization for long-term systemic growth. As Terence was just mentioning, the fact of the matter is we are a federal government organization, and we are charged to be an employee of choice by measuring ourselves against the diversity of America, which is the civilian labor force. And we do this annually against our Management Directive 715 report. That's our report card to the American public on how we look from a diversity perspective. And I will tell you right now that NOAA is trying to still, in some areas, get past that threshold line, if you will, of claiming to be a fully diverse organization. So we have work, there's work in progress right now, but the needle is moving, but slowly in some areas. And I will also add to that conversation that, as you all most know, the US Census is done every 10 years. So in 2020, the 2020 census was just completed. And in that 2020 census, the report came out that America as a whole increased its diversity by 9%, with the top two fastest growing underrepresented or minority groups was Latinos, Latinos in America, as well as Asian Americans. Okay, so by all means, when we look at our numbers at NOAA and our population and our workforce, not only is it important that we continue continuously strive to be an employee of choice, but also an employee of choice that values the importance of diversity. And not only bringing diverse individuals into our workforce, but enabling or allowing and creating a culture that allows every single human being that comes into our workforce to be their full selves at work, to reach their full potential. And this, of course, makes greater teams, and it makes the organization more prepared to reach its ultimate mission. So we also talked about the pre-pilot orders beginning. We talked about how it came, some very important information with respects to the ERGs and the grassroots effort that goes on in NOAA. And I will tell you, just as you all stated, just as was stated before, that is where most of your change comes, from that grassroots perspective. And we really applaud them. And obviously, in my line of work, whenever we have those employee resource groups and those affinity groups working at heart, we do every single thing that we can to do to support their efforts and to support their passion. Also, from an agency leadership key, again, I use the term courageous leadership because, again, leadership challenges are plenty. There are so many things leaderships have to do when it comes to making decisions, but it's tremendously imperative that leaders are including diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as accessibility in their thought process as they're making those leadership decisions. And sometimes, in order to be a courageous leader, you have to do things that others might not see always as the right thing to do or prepared to do at this time. So I do give kudos to Dr. Volz for saying, from a leadership perspective, Eli, get the team together, let's make this happen. Expectations from managers and participants during the pilot, as we talked about, that was hugely important. This pilot is designed to be not only a viable tool for NOAA to reduce hiring bias in their hiring process, but more importantly, for it to be user-friendly, for it to be something that individuals within the organization understands that this is a tool designed for them to use to better them and ultimately to better organization, and not something that is being forced upon them or something that they do not find user-friendly, if you will, to be able to execute. So the next steps on orders, obviously, as Dr. Young talked about, there's some data points that we must capture. So we're using leadership support in order to release these participation surveys out to not only our overall NOAA users, but also internally at NESDIS to support the pilot. We have our hiring managers and selecting officials. So we're reaching out to them, stressing the importance of getting this information, getting their feedback, making this information valuable for us to be able to, as Dr. Young said, we need to package this in a proper way so that hopefully NOAA will see this as a long-term valuable solution moving forward with addressing hiring bias in the hiring process. And obviously, starting out with entities like the NOAA Executive Panel, the NEP, which usually is the decision-making body, if you will, within NOAA. So, but there's also going to be opportunities for us to socialize the NOAA pilot throughout NOAA, even in what we're doing now in with the library's brown bag luncheon. So we are definitely going to take advantage of all of those opportunities to socialize the pilot. And then again, kudos to Latinos at NOAA, who, again, those are those courageous individuals down at the grassroots level who are moving the needle forward as best they can at their particular level by supporting initiatives like this. And I also want to give Dr. Young or Alisa and Terence, we're first name basis, I'm sorry for being so, but I want to give them an opportunity to kind of chime in on the summary of it and the then, the now, and the future, if you will.
Terence, why don't you go first this time?
You know I'm a talker, Alisa, but I hope not to take too much time. So I'm very passionate about D&I. I will tell you that orders is just what we said. It is a tool, but with anything, it has to be used. It's only as good as its use. Now, orders will not solve all of our problems, but it can help. So there are some other things that have to happen as well. We have to first have a diverse pool of applicants, okay? Then it's incumbent upon the hiring managers or the selecting officials to interview a diverse pool of persons. then orders kicks in. By having that diverse panel, it could possibly lead to a diverse selection. So again, as Eli mentioned, this is a grassroots effort. We're just 3 persons, our team, I think it's another 3 individuals, but we need you all in terms of your help with communicating this across your respective organizations and having those conversations with your supervisors. I want you to take a deep look and just look across your organization, because there's always an opportunity for change. Orders can help in that effort, but we also need you all to continue to place it upon people's mind, the importance and the value of having a diverse organization. So that's all I'll say at this point. I'm pretty sure there will be some questions, but again, we're very passionate about what we're doing. This effort started back in 2017, and here we are, right up on the cusp of 2023. But we will continue to do what we can, but we need your help in terms of moving this forward.
Thanks, Terrence. I'll just add 2 points. The first is based on that red highlighted text. What is the purpose of building a great tool if you don't advertise it? So in some of the questionnaires that we did get responses on from our hiring managers or our hiring officials, some of them said they didn't know about orders, which is really a missed opportunity. So we want to do a better job of advertising, but as Terrence mentioned, we're only a small team. We do want folks that hear about the tool to spread the word, to talk to their hiring managers about the tool, and creating diverse hiring panels. We don't really have a lot of requirements in terms of reporting on the number of panels and the diversity of the panels. And so this is a baseline attempt for us to really start to do that, put that in place. It is a part of some of the questions that are in that manager's questionnaire. The other thing that I'll mention is the monthly workforce analytics report. This is it's called the MWAR, and it is a report that NESDIS produces. I'm not sure if the other line offices also produce it, but it gives a really good snapshot in terms of the breakdown of the workforce. It gives information on retirements, it gives information on hires, new hires, it gives demographic information. So it really helps to educate anyone who has an interest in understanding more about the DEIA makeup of their particular office, and then for NESDIS as a whole. And I'll have to follow up with that, Bowman, just in terms of the other line offices and similar reports that are being produced. But I think for folks that are interested, it is a really good a source of information, and helps to kind of, frame, your thoughts just in terms of where we are looking at the civilian labor force, kind of going back to Eli's point about, some of our DEIA goals as an agency. So with that, I'll stop. I'm starting to stumble on my words, so I'll just give it back over to Eli. But thank you, Eli. Great presentation, and looking forward to a lot of questions from the audience.
All right, Katie, so do we have any questions?
Okay, I don't see any questions yet, but several comments about proud to be included and thanking you all so much. But if someone does have a question, I encourage them to put that in the question panel. And I think I'm actually going to throw it back to Dr. Lynch and say, do we have any frequently asked questions you would like to address?
So we hit on this point earlier. People said, well, I signed up for the tool when it initially started, when you were collecting information, but I have yet to be contacted. As I mentioned, this is kind of a catalog, a menu. You know how you go on Amazon and you type in, and they're just like a menu of different things. Well, really, it's incumbent upon that person to select who they want. what we try to do for those persons that have served multiple times on panels is we try to encourage for them to use other persons, because there can be some bias in the process. For instance, as I mentioned, I've served on many panels. People kind of know that I'm going to be real with them in terms of the input that I give, but I'm just one perspective. If you know you're going to get that from me, hey, it might be worthwhile for you to seek out someone else. And I mean outside of the current office, it can be in another line office, but it brings a different perspective. So I would tell you, for those who have signed up, no need to be down and out about it. Your time will be coming. I just ask that you be prepared, and be prepared to be honest when asked. So I would say I'm also looking forward to the process in terms of when we solicit input from those persons from their panel experience. I will say from my past experience, some of it has been kind of eye-opening. Let's just be honest. Pre-selections, they do occur. But we want to change the game. We want to change that mindset and open people up to a different perspective. So nothing down about, like I said, the programs that we currently have in place, but we know what we're getting if we go that route. But as a selecting official, you can choose whoever you want to hire. That's the power that you have. But I will say that there are other things that exist out there, but we have to first be open-minded about it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Terence. Okay, we do have a few questions that came in, and I'm going to say they are for anyone on the panel who wants to answer them. So our first question is, what is the definition of a diverse panel in your survey? Is a panel of people the same race and gender, but with different grade levels, considered diverse?
Sure, I'll take that question. What we seek to do initially in the orders palette was to ensure that we broaden the definition of diversity within the panel. And I had this conversation with leadership, senior leadership, because they kind of shared their vision. They just didn't want diversity broken down by age, race, gender, things of that nature, the obvious, but they wanted they wanted diversity in perspective. They wanted diversity in organizational collaboration. They wanted the diversity in different levels within the organization versus junior or middle level individuals if given the opportunity, or just as Terence alluded to earlier, members from different employee resource groups or affinity groups that had different perspectives on things, whether it be women in NOAA or Latinos at NOAA, things of that nature. So as you can see, the definition of diversity was cast very broadly. We casted a wide net with respects to what we were looking at to measure diversity within the hiring panel. And I will tell you, I searched through OPMs as well as other regulatory entities to find out, was there in fact a general definition that they had defined diversity as you were doing your recruitment. And again, we measure it certain ways for certain things, but also when you broaden your thought of what diversity is in your organization, which I will tell you right now, 2 or more people in a room means you have diversity, okay, regardless of their gender or their race, because there is so much diversity in so many other areas. So what we try to do is make sure we cast the widest net with respects to that, and also be able to, again, as Terence alluded to, we want to ensure that individuals who previously was being left out of that opportunity to get that experience and to learn from it and grow from it. And also, more importantly, I want to add, for the individuals who are currently hiring managers and selecting officials, as well as new individuals that are volunteered through the orders palette, the importance of respecting the power that you're giving when you are basically changing individuals' lives or changing their livelihood or providing an employee, that you're doing it in the most fair and equitable way, meaning that you have to leave as much as possible through education and awareness your hiring biases at the door.
Hey, Eli, let me just jump in there just from my experience. I like to give personal stories because I think people are able to get it at that moment. When I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2001, I was applying, trying to get in the federal government. Went on a lot of interviews, and people said, well, you have the education, but you don't have the experience. But then also, had I not gone to get my PhD, it would have been, well, you have the experience, but you don't have the education. Mm-hmm. So when I interviewed with the Ag Research Service. They brought me in for an interview, first by phone. Interview went well, and they said, well, we would like for you to come in. I said, well, I'm in Blacksburg, and I'm headed down to Louisiana for an interview in Arkansas within the next couple of days. So I'm going in the opposite direction. They said, well, okay, we really want to bring you in. We're going to see what we can do. We're going to think about flying you up, which is what they did. So when I went into this interview, this is 2001, the persons I interviewed were not diverse. It was white, older males, probably 60+ years old. And it was one female, she was probably 30, 35 or so. But the interview went really well. And I had an offer on the table, but I didn't have an offer on the table. But I led them to believe I had an offer on the table. So the guy told me he was going on annual leave, would be gone for a couple of weeks. I said, well, I don't know. I got a couple of offers on the table. He said, okay, I'm gonna get back with you. Next day he called and he gave me the offer. As part of that conversation, he told me, he said, Terence, you really stood out. He said, we've been rotating people in this position for 2 years, and none of them were diverse. He said, one thing that I like that you would bring is, he said, you're young, you have innovative ideas. And he said, I have to be honest with you. He said, you would bring another element in terms of a person from an underrepresented population. They extended an offer to me and I accepted. I was the only Black at a GS-12 level. I started off my career as a GS-12 and was a supervisor. Furthermore, I was the only Black PhD in the entire George Washington Carver building over in Beltsville off of Sunnyside Avenue. I credit my beginning to Dr. Alan Dietrich. He was probably 65 at the time, but he was willing to take a chance on me. And the first thing he let me know is that, Terence, I want you to know that you're just like us. You have the same voice. Well, in my mind, I knew that wasn't the case, but he believed in me. He was willing to take a chance and change the game. This is all we're asking people to do. Try something different. Now, did everybody agree with it? No, because they had served in details. And who it is, we got this little 25-year-old, he's telling me what to do. I had persons 40+ years old that were now reporting to me. They didn't like it, but they came to like me because they saw that I was fair. They saw that I was fair. They saw that I was open-minded. That's all we're asking to do, is people to be more open-minded when it comes to their hiring decisions. So we're providing them with this tool to help with that. So again, that's my story. I can tell you that it works, but it has to start with the heart of the hiring manager.
Thank you so much, Eli and Dr. Lynch. We do have a few more questions, and I'm going to try and get to those before the end of our hour. So our next question is, thank you all for this important diverse hiring tool and for this presentation. Do you have a timeline for when this might be presented to NEP and NEP with the recommendation to implement this cross-organizationally?
Yes, I'll very quickly just say that right now our timeline is to present this to the NEP probably by the first quarter of FY23, which will usually be October, November, December timeframe. And Dr. Young, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree. We had targeted for September. It likely will be in Q1. Again, we are trying to update our metrics. So for anyone who is a participant, again, please look to hear from us soon with the survey. This, again, will roll into those data that will be reported to the NEP. And other than that, yeah, I think Q1 is accurate for our reporting.
Wonderful. Our next question is, how much lead time is needed to get any panelists to participate on a hiring panel? I've heard they're not always available to participate.
Terence, I'll let you tackle that.
I think that's somewhat of a loaded question because I think when you say they're not available, Eli, I think last time we checked in the database, there were 100+ people, right? So you may not get your first choice, but I can assure you that second or third choice may be available. So it goes back to just being open-minded.
And I'll also say that, you know, in our current COVID, you know, working conditions where a lot of folks are working remotely or teleworking rather, our meetings, you know, we've talked about this in other meetings in terms of how many meetings are on the calendar. So when people say they're available, it's largely because of all of the meetings. But as Terence mentioned, there's a lot of people that are in order. So if you get a denial on your first ask, please pursue other people, and I'm sure you'll find someone with the availability.
Great, thank you, Dr. Young. Another question specifically for you, Dr. Young. Has the excellent research you did several years ago on the diversity assessment within NOAA and the federal government morphed into the monthly metrics report that you mentioned?
I would like to say that it has. It has not been implemented across all of the line offices, or rather there are some variances in terms of what each line office is producing. However, I think the goal should be to be consistent in terms of those monthly workforce analytics. The report, I'm not sure how many folks have seen the NESDIS version of the report, but it's excellent. It gives a list of the folks that have been hired within each different program office. It gives information again on the retirements, the amount of time it takes for us to hire in different stages of the hiring process. So these are areas that we can work on, and without the reporting, we really don't know. So now that the reporting is available, please review it. Please add feedback to Thad. A lot of the work that we do for the person who mentioned that study has been to bring us to this place where we have more transparency. So I think that, you know, those are awesome developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. I don't see any more questions. There is one comment I do want to read. But before that, I just wanted to remind everyone that we did record this and it will be posted up on the library's YouTube channel for you to reshare and rewatch later on. If someone does have a question, would you encourage them to reach out to Eli, Dr. Lynch, Dr. Young? Who should they reach out to?
Yes, yes, by all means, they can reach out to myself. And of course, I will include in that conversation Dr. Young as well as Dr. Lynch. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we get you an answer. Whether we have the answer, we're going to put you in contact with individuals who do have the answer. And then, yeah, by all means, we will not leave anyone hanging from that perspective.
Wonderful. Okay, I believe with no more questions, we can end a little early and give everybody about 5 minutes back in their day. But I do want to read this last comment because I feel like it really encapsulates words today, this whole talk. So this is a quote, not a quote, a direct quote from one of our attendees. This is a tremendous and a big step forward to ensure DEI and A, just the recognition of implicit bias, heightens awareness, and for participants to do their part to eliminate it. So I want to thank Dr. Lynch, Dr. Young, Eli for this wonderful presentation today. I hope everyone has a safe and healthy rest of their Wednesday. Please take care. Thank you all again.
Thank you.